Your workout might be making your belly fat worse. Not slightly worse, actively worse. Like you'd have less belly fat if you stayed home and watched Netflix. And if you've been hitting the gym hard, doing cardio 5 times a week, maybe throwing in some HIIT, and your stomach still looks the same or worse, this is probably why. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why intense exercise can backfire, what's happening with your hormones, and how to actually train in a way that forces your body to drop belly fat instead of store it. Let's start with the hormone that's been sabotaging you behind your back, cortisol. You've probably heard of it. It's called the stress hormone, which sounds kind of vague and wellness influencer-y. But cortisol does something very specific that matters for this conversation. It tells your body where to store fat, and it has a favorite location. Your belly fat cells have 4 times more cortisol receptors than fat cells anywhere else in your body. 4 times. Your love handles, your thighs, your arms, they're basically ignoring cortisol. But your visceral fat, the deep belly fat around your organs, is listening very carefully to every cortisol signal you send. So when cortisol goes up, your body doesn't just store more fat, it specifically stores more fat around your midsection. It's like cortisol has a GPS that's permanently set to your stomach. Now here's where exercise comes in. There's a study from 2008 that tested men at 3 different exercise intensities. At 40% of their max effort, basically a casual walk, cortisol barely moved, actually went down slightly when they adjusted for hydration changes. At 60% effort, moderate cardio, cortisol spiked 40%. At 80% effort, intense cardio, cortisol shot up 83%. The threshold is right around 60% of your VO2 max, which translates to roughly 70% of your max heart rate. Below that line, cortisol stays chill. Above that line, cortisol goes through the roof. So every time you're gasping for air on the treadmill, every time you're pushing through a HIIT workout, every time you're in that zone where talking feels impossible, your cortisol is spiking. And if you're doing that 5 or 6 days a week, you're basically marinating your belly fat cells in the one hormone that makes them grow. But wait, it gets worse. A meta-analysis looked at 50 studies on HIIT and found that high-intensity intervals cause an 82% cortisol spike. And here's the part nobody tells you. 73% of peak cortisol doesn't happen during your workout. It happens after, between 30 and 90 minutes after you finish. So you crush a 30-minute HIIT session, you feel great, you go home, take a shower, and your cortisol is still climbing. It peaks while you're eating dinner. Your workout ended 2 hours ago, and your body is still in stress mode, still getting the signal to store belly fat. Duration makes it worse too. Even at moderate intensity, once you go past 60 minutes, cortisol keeps climbing. A 90-minute intense session delivers way more cortisol exposure than intensity or duration alone. You're getting hit from both sides. This explains something that's always confused people. Marathon runners, endurance athletes, people who run 50 miles a week. Some of them have this weird, skinny fat thing going on where they're thin everywhere except they've got this stubborn belly pooch. Shouldn't all that cardio be burning it off? There was a study that measured cortisol in hair samples. Hair cortisol is brilliant because it shows your average cortisol levels over months, not just a single moment. They tested over 300 endurance athletes against normal people and found that the athletes had significantly higher cortisol across all time periods measured. And the more they trained, the higher their cortisol. Chronic endurance training creates sustained cortisol elevation lasting months. These athletes are essentially living in a constant state of low-grade stress that their body interprets the same way it interprets being chased by a predator. Store fat around the organs, prepare for famine, survive. Their bodies are doing exactly what evolution designed them to do. It's just not what anyone wants when they're trying to get a flat stomach. Now let me explain the mechanism that makes this even more unfair. Inside your belly fat, there's an enzyme called 11-beta HSD1. Don't worry about the name, just know what it does. It converts inactive cortisone into active cortisol directly inside your fat tissue. So you've got cortisol circulating in your blood from your workout. But then this enzyme takes inactive cortisol precursors and converts them into more active cortisol right there in your belly fat. It's like your stomach has its own cortisol factory. In studies on mice, this enzyme was expressed 128 times higher in visceral fat compared to normal. When researchers genetically modified mice to have more of this enzyme just in their fat tissue, those mice developed visceral obesity, insulin resistance, and metabolic dysfunction. The enzyme alone was enough to create belly fat. And here's the vicious cycle. The more belly fat you have, the more of this enzyme you express. The more enzyme you have, the more local cortisol you produce. The more cortisol, the more belly fat. It's a feedback loop designed to make you miserable. But there is another side to this story, because not all exercise spikes cortisol. Remember that study with the 3 intensities? At 40% effort, cortisol actually decreased. Walking, easy cycling, swimming at a conversational pace, these activities reduce cortisol rather than spike it. A study on forest walking found that cortisol dropped 14% after a walk in nature. Yoga has been shown to lower cortisol, although there's a catch. Slow, meditative yoga like hatha significantly reduces cortisol. Fast, intense yoga like power vinyasa doesn't. The breathing and the parasympathetic activation matter more than the physical poses. Resistance training is interesting. It causes an acute cortisol spike, but the overall hormonal effect is different from cardio. One study found that drinking a carbohydrate drink during weight training blunted the cortisol response by 92%. You can almost eliminate the cortisol spike from lifting just by having some carbs. And here's the thing about cardio and visceral fat that seems contradictory but actually makes sense. The Duke Stride study compared resistance training, aerobic training, and combined training over 8 months. Aerobic training reduced visceral fat by about 16 square centimeters. Resistance training alone showed basically no change. Combined training fell in between. So cardio does burn belly fat, but the key is the intensity and duration. The study used moderate cardio, walking or jogging. When they looked at the dose response, they found that the equivalent of about 12 miles per week at moderate intensity was enough to prevent visceral fat gain. 20 miles per week at moderate to vigorous intensity actually reduced it. The problem isn't cardio. The problem is chronic, high-intensity cardio without adequate recovery. There's a sweet spot where you get the fat-burning benefits without the cortisol accumulation. And we can't talk about cortisol and belly fat without talking about sleep. A Mayo Clinic study took people and restricted their sleep to 4 hours per night for 21 days. Just 3 weeks of bad sleep. Visceral fat increased 11%. They ate 300 extra calories per day. And here's the brutal part. When they let people sleep normally again, the visceral fat didn't go away. Catch-up sleep didn't reverse it. So if you're training hard, not sleeping enough, maybe doing fasted morning cardio after staying up late, you're stacking cortisol on top of cortisol. Your workout is stressing your body. Your sleep deprivation is stressing your body. And all that stress is being deposited directly into your midsection. NHANES data showed that visceral fat hit its minimum plateau at 8 or more hours of sleep. Anything less and belly fat starts creeping up, independent of diet or exercise. So what's the actual solution? How do you exercise in a way that drops belly fat instead of storing it? Number 1, do most of your cardio at conversational pace. Zone 2, the intensity where you can talk in full sentences. This is below the 60% threshold where cortisol spikes. You're still burning calories, you're still improving cardiovascular health, but you're not bathing your organs in stress hormones. Number 2, limit your high-intensity sessions. HIIT works. It's effective, but 2 or 3 sessions per week max, with full recovery days between. Not 6, not daily. The cortisol accumulates if you don't give your body time to come back down. Number 3, keep intense sessions short. Under 45 minutes produces manageable cortisol. Over 60 to 90 minutes at high intensity creates a cortisol burden that requires serious recovery. Number 4, prioritize strength training. 2 days per week minimum, 48 hours between sessions, targeting the same muscles. Weight training builds the muscle mass that drives your metabolism and doesn't create the same chronic cortisol elevation as endless cardio. Number 5, walk daily. This sounds too simple to matter, but it does. Low-intensity movement throughout the day actively lowers cortisol. A 30-minute walk does more for your cortisol profile than an extra HIIT session. Number 6, sleep at least 7 hours, ideally 8 or more. All the perfect training in the world can't overcome chronic sleep deprivation. Your body will store belly fat if it thinks it's under constant threat, and bad sleep sends exactly that signal. Number 7, if you must exercise in the evening, choose weights over cardio. Research shows that endurance exercise before bed increases cortisol and disrupts sleep architecture more than resistance training. HIIT in the evening increases cortisol the next morning and decreases sleep quality. Here's what a good week looks like for cortisol management and belly fat loss. 2 or 3 days of Zone 2 cardio, 30 to 45 minutes at a pace where you can chat with someone. 2 days of strength training. 1 or maybe 2 HIIT sessions that are under 30 minutes each. 1 or 2 complete rest days. And daily walking that doesn't even feel like exercise. Most people are doing the exact opposite. HIIT every day. Long, intense runs. No rest days because rest feels lazy. They're working incredibly hard and getting the opposite result of what they want. Here's the bottom line. Your belly fat has 4 times more cortisol receptors than fat anywhere else. Every time you spike cortisol, you're specifically telling your body to store fat around your organs. High-intensity exercise spikes cortisol. Chronic high-intensity exercise keeps it elevated for months. The fix isn't less exercise, it's smarter exercise. More Zone 2, less HIIT, adequate strength training, proper recovery, real sleep. You don't need to destroy yourself in the gym to lose belly fat. In fact, destroying yourself might be exactly why you're not losing it. If this changed how you think about training, hit that subscribe button. I drop videos every week breaking down the science of what actually works for your body. No trends, no hype, just what the research shows. I'll see you in the next one.